What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Blazers Uprise Live here on a Monday, a monumental Monday, as the Blazers in this past weekend, Eric, including today, have done some things. They've actually made some signings. And, all offseason, it's basically been re-signings. I don't know if you can, Moses Brown wasn't really re-signing. He had played here before, but he wasn't really re-signing. The Blazers re-signed Kevin Knox, and then if a guy was on the Summer League team, is he a re-signing? They bring in Duop Reath, who played on their Summer League team. So all players we are at least vaguely familiar with, and we're going to talk about what those signings mean for the Portland Trail Blazers, and most notably, the Dame Saga, which got an update today from Shams Charania. And it was basically the status quo, but I thought the report was interesting for a couple of reasons that we're going to get into, and we're going to debate, and we're going to talk about maybe how these moves affect the Dame situation as well. Everything kind of ties together here, and it's going to make for a very interesting episode. We'll get your guys' thoughts on things as well, and I'm really looking forward to it. This is our first Monday off-season night stream of football season. I know that was like a pretty big football game today, and already some tough injury luck in the NFL, So kind of winding down from that, ready to talk some basketball. My weekend's been filled with football. Me and Eric took a fantasy L. It's been a little bit rough, so we're more than ready to talk about the Blazers for once. Eric, how's it going?
Stupid Cowboys defense.
Yeah, so Eric got screwed by the Cowboys defense getting 2 touchdowns and 36 points. Ridiculous stuff, but
yeah.
How's it going?
Oh, not too bad. Started my new job today, so just
Congrats.
Went through some training, so that went well. Hope everyone in chat is doing well. Let's hear what you did over the weekend and today. Hope everyone's doing well.
Yeah, so for me, oh god, I wish the energy warning did not bring up baseball, because now I'm annoyed. Anyway, yeah, baseball sucks. Football, our Niners took care of business, but fantasy sucked. So hopefully basketball can save us, because, oh man, my Mariners are just pissing me off right now. Oh my goodness. So they were down. They would go into the 10th inning. They have been awful in extras all year long, Eric. They go into the 10th inning, go down 5-3. Julio ties up the game in the bottom of the 10th with a 2-run home run. And right now they're down 8-5 in the 11th. So that bullpen that's been great is just an awful mess right now, and we literally took a loss against the Rays because we were trying to save our bullpen. Doesn't matter, they still suck now. So anyway, frustrating. Hopefully your guys' sports adventures went well this weekend, and yeah, like Eric said, tell us what you accomplished.
Someone bet on Dallas to lose. That was a bad bet.
Very bad bet. Very bad bet. Braden Pierce wants to know your new job. I don't know if you want to leak your employment or not.
Yeah, I work for a beverage distributor now.
Yeah.
That's as much as I'll say.
So if you need to drink yourself to sleep, Eric got you. Do you deliver beer or just drinks?
Beer and wine and stuff, yeah. And
yeah.
Also other stuff. Other beverages like Red Bull, some soda, stuff like that.
Got you.
Yep.
The good news is it saves, the hours work with Blazers Uprise Live, and Blazers Uprise during the season, so that's exciting. Because, we had to have some really good guests on during your 2-week hiatus just so chat wouldn't lose their minds.
Not too much, Tori.
Yeah. Anyway, let's just jump into things since we are a little bit limited on time tonight. Eric, I'll hand the mic to you, as I like to do, to make you decide what we talk about first, because there is actually multiple things.
Yeah, let's just get into the Shams stuff first. So Shams reports today. He prefaces it by saying, in theory. So I don't know how much you can take from that, but he says that Damian Lillard's only going to report to training camp for 2 teams. One of those being the Portland Trail Blazers, which is somewhat interesting that he would say that. And the other would be the Miami Heat, of course. But he said he wouldn't report to any other team.
Yeah, I thought this report was interesting, not necessarily because of the report, but because of where it might have came from. What's your theory on this? Like, okay, well, let me just preface this by saying this is probably most likely just Shams speculating. He's done so before. But if it's not speculation, what do you think?
Yeah, it's so... Okay, I don't know for sure where it's coming from, but I do know two places it is not coming from. And the first is the Miami Heat. It's not coming from them because part of the whole memo thing was the threat that the league could step in and veto a Damian Lillard trade. So Miami Heat have been on their best behavior in terms of not leaking stuff, this exact type of thing, to make sure that they don't have a trade eventually for Damian Lillard that the league steps in and doesn't approve because of what's happened. So I've heard that it is not the Miami Heat. And I also heard that it's not coming from Dame, so or his camp or anything, not his agent Aaron Goodwin or anything like that. That they've been they sealed their lips. I mean, Dame's been asked about it, and he's kind of, shook his head or whatever. I forgot exactly what he did when he got asked about it on that one podcast. But he's not going to Shams or Woj or Chris Haynes and like getting them to report that he's only reporting to two teams. So that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen for now. I mean, eventually Dame could play dirty, but I don't think this would be the way they go about it. It just seems counterproductive for Dame to keep reinstating the fact that he only wants to play for Miami. That doesn't really make a lot of sense for him to come out and do that anyway. So, as far as I know, those two things did not occur that did not come from either of those two places. So that leaves two things. Either Shams is just making stuff up or, basing it off old facts of the case that he thinks are still relevant, or the Blazers are leaking it, which is a possibility in my mind, because all along they've only cared about the perception of their front office versus Dame and making Dame look bad in this situation. So there is a strong chance that the Blazers, and they go through Shams instead of Woj, so people don't think it's them. But these kind of Shams and Woj get information because they're willing to do this stuff for teams when they ask them to do it. So it's like you scratch our back with this, and we'll scratch your back when you need to next time. So it's very possible that the Blazers are just simply gearing up for a Miami trade that they know they're going to have to eventually take because it's the only offer even worth even thinking about accepting for Dame. There's no other offers even close to the Miami offer, let alone one that would be considered. And so to me, they're setting this up to be a situation where they can say, Dame just left us no choice. What were we supposed to do? And just push it all on him when they make a bad trade.
Yeah. I do think that it is Shams just speculating.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I do believe, but if it's not that, then I think it would be Portland. Because, as you've stated, it doesn't make sense for Dame and his agent, especially after the memo, to go and reiterate the status quo. They've made it very clear that Dame wants Miami and doesn't want to go to other teams. They've made that as clear as possible. Why would they need to go do that again? Especially if you've heard that it wasn't from Dame. Like, I truly don't believe it's from Dame. And then, I mean, the Heat have Portland right where they want them, right? Why would they need to go and do this, especially after the memo in which the league said that they could veto such a deal, It's just there's no incentive for either of those two parties to do it. And when I saw this report, it just got me thinking, like, this is exactly what Portland would want to be out there right before they take back a subpar package from Miami. Because they would want it to be we had no choice, this was the best on the table. And
he wouldn't report to any team, so we couldn't trade him.
Exactly. Exactly, and we've talked about this for months leading up to this point. Like, that is a convenient narrative for the Blazers to move on from him, and it's not that they don't want that narrative out there. And I don't think it's a true narrative. I think Dame would show up to training camp for other teams. I mean, it's not like Dame, if he ends up in Milwaukee with this guy Giannis, it's not like Dame to sit there and say, nah, I'm not showing up because I didn't end up in Miami. Miami's definitely his number one choice, but I do not think that narrative is true. But it's a narrative that I don't think Portland minds having out there, because I think that's exactly what they would want people thinking if and when, maybe it's when, they take a subpar package back from Miami. Because even if they take back the most Miami could offer, there's still going to be a lot of Blazer fans out there, and some of these fans have had the front offices back. There's still going to be a lot of criticism out there. And as we've said, Eric, it won't necessarily be from us, because at this point, like, that package isn't quite as bad as everybody's saying, and we expected there to not be much of a market for Dame anyway heading into this whole entire saga. So we were prepared, if it came to this, for this to be the outcome, for this to be the resolution. So that's just kind of where it leaves us right now.
Yeah, so to that second part about Dame reporting to other teams, I believe that is 100% false. I think he would actually report to whatever team he is on. And I do think in the beginning, Aaron Goodwin, his agent, did use that as a scare tactic. Obviously, the league reprimanded him and Dame and told them not to talk in that manner or they'd be fined. We saw James Harden get fined for comments he made about his GM. I do believe that at one point Goodwin was saying that early on, shortly after July 1st. But ever since the memo, like I said, they're not telling teams that. And in the memo, it in fact said that for the most part, I forgot how it was worded. I think that's how it was. For the most part, Aaron Goodwin was telling the truth when he said that he wasn't telling teams that Dame wouldn't play for them. So, just considering Shams has had a bit of a past of, dating back to the Gary Payton saga, just flat out lying for another team, or not fact checking before he posts stuff, and then also not backtracking or ever issuing an apology to the Blazers front office for those lies. There is some dynamic there of Shams might be doing his own thing, or trying to do this to maybe get the league to step in, and maybe there's a team that really doesn't want Dame to go to the Heat, so they're trying to make it look bad for the Heat or something. I don't know. But, there's not really any logical reason to believe that Dame would just ask for a trade immediately, like you said, if he got traded to the Milwaukee Bucks or the Clippers or any number of teams.
Yeah, it's just very interesting, the report is, from where it came from. I also thought the timing of it was a little interesting, considering the signings that the Blazers have made in the past couple of days, because the whole thing all offseason was they're saving their roster spots in case of a Dame trade, where they'll probably be taking back more players than they're sending out. Mm-hmm. And they want those roster spots for that. But supposedly they have gone and filled those roster spots. Now, I don't know the details on the Kevin Knox or Duop Reath signings. George Conditt's in Exhibit 10. So
you're going to be waived, yeah.
Yeah, like, he can be waived. He can be sent to the G League, basically. So he doesn't really take up a roster spot. But Kevin Knox coming back, I would assume that's just a minimum contract. Maybe it's non-guaranteed. But I would have a hard time believing that the Blazers are making these signings without an idea of what is the resolution for a Dame trade. Actually, I'll go one step further. I think Portland's already decided what they're doing with Dame. I don't know what that is, but I believe they've already decided that they're either going to take back a certain package from Miami, or that they're bringing him into training camp. Mm-hmm. Because at this point, you know what is on the table for Miami. It's not like they can, they have a bunch of assets and maybe can put new ones on the table and need to talk about it more. Like, if they've had conversations, I do believe that Portland has an idea of what Miami's willing to give up. Miami doesn't have many assets anyway, so it's kind of clear cut and dry. And it comes down to, will Portland take that offer or not? We all know what Miami's best offer is. It's 3 first-round picks after they mess with the protections on the 2025 first they owe Chicago. It's Jaime Jaquez Jr., and it's Nikola Jovic, and maybe Caleb Martin, right? Like, that's the one piece that maybe, I mean, would we even want him? Like, he doesn't really make sense on this team that's kind of filled with perimeter players that's rebuilding. But
I was thinking about this. If Caleb Martin went to, like, OKC and they were willing to move that pick to 2024 instead of 2026, and then we got 26, 28, 30, and then swaps in 25, 27, and 29, I think that's probably the best case scenario, right?
Yeah, but, at that point, it's 2024 versus 2026, right? The margins are thin there that I think Portland already truly knows what the resolution is going to be before training camp. And either there is one and he's traded, or there's not one and this lingers on to the season. I think Portland already knows. And if you remember my tweet, go ahead.
Real quick before people jump on us, also Tyler Hero going to a third team for another pick, right?
Yes. So I should have said 4 first. Yes. Tyler Hero going to another team, yes.
Yes.
For a pick. Like, maybe that's what they have to sort out. But the market for Tyler Hero is already kind of known right now, right? Like, you might be able to get a pick. It's not going to be unprotected. If not a first-round pick, maybe you can get back a young player. Maybe you can get back, a Jaden Springer type of young player. Although he's a guard, he doesn't make sense. We kind of need bigs and, big forwards with potential. That are, like, truly have potential. I'll have a conversation on we do have a logjam of forwards now if you bring in Kevin Knox and bring in a Dame package from Miami where you add Jaquez and Jovic to our forward groups, but we'll talk about that in a bit. I lost track of my thoughts because 38% of our stream chat doesn't think we can get the stream to 100 likes, which just crushes my soul anyway. Just like Trent Calmer's soul was crushed tonight. Yeah, I'm all but give... they're still half a game out of playoff spot, but the fact that they've already lost their freaking playoff spot, the Mariners are pissing me off. I just don't even want to think about baseball. I don't want to talk about baseball. Please do not mention the Mariners or any sport that doesn't involve an egg-shaped ball or a basketball, okay? No baseball. Can't do it. Anyway, what was I saying? Where was I going with that? You're pretty good at finishing my thoughts, Eric.
You were talking about how the Blazers have already decided.
Oh, I think they've already made up their minds. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad theory. I mean, it makes sense if they're taking the Heat trade, why they're starting the PR battle, if that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Because they know... See... Here's the thing. The Cronin is in a weird spot because he knows he has to or wants to or has wanted to trade Dame all along. He knows Miami is like the only spot for Dame right now currently. He knows he tried for 2+ months now to get another team involved, and that just never materialized. So now he's coming up, with a couple weeks until training camp, and he's got to make a decision, like you said, on whether he wants to bring Dame to camp or let this linger into the season, or give up Dame for the Miami package. The problem is he has this huge group of supporters, right, amongst Blazer fans.
The cronies.
And that seems to be the most vocal group against the Miami trade, right? So his biggest supporters are the most vocal about saying the Miami package sucks. It's terrible. You can't make that trade. You can't deal him to Miami. Don't just trade him to trade him, like all that stuff. So he's stuck between doing what he has to do and making a trade that's going to irritate the people that have blindly given excuses for him this whole time. So it's very intriguing to see what side wins of that. Do you try to save your ego and keep Dame for as long as possible? Or do you just bite the bullet and make Dame look like the bad guy by saying crap like he'll only report to Miami and Portland and make it look like my hands were tied, I had no other choice, like Dame made this public and there was nothing I could do once that happened, because like no teams were willing to give us anything because Dame was behind the scenes telling them he wouldn't show up and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a case where I think Joe's just biding time to see if he wants to, take a shot to his crony fan base, if that's what you want to call them.
The cronies.
Yeah.
And let me interject here, just to kind of add on to what you said. As far as like caring about the image, it could also be Burt Cold and Jody Allen, because I've heard multiple times that like Burt Cold, Jody Allen, they don't want to look dumb. They don't want to look bad.
Yeah.
And they care about their image. Like, we say Joe Cronin, but it's more like Joe Cronin and Burt Cold and Jody Allen collectively in regards to caring about their perception and the perception of this organization. And that seems to, in my eyes, affect the way that they're going about this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, here's the thing. A lot of organizations care about their perception and may go about things a certain way in order to try and improve their perception or not damage their perception with the fan base, because it's a business, right? Like, you want fans paying money for tickets and showing up to your games because then you make more money as a business. Like, it's not a bad thing or unheard of that they care about their perception. It's just when it comes to a messy situation like this and you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place that, in my opinion, the organization put themselves in. They put themselves in this position. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of like you just got to bite the bullet. I don't think anybody would have had a problem if they were aggressive in terms of building around Dame and succeeded, and Dame was here to stay, right? But they chose the young route, right? They talked about how much they wanted to win, and then did not back that up with any sort of action. But of course, fans wanted to hear that they wanted to win, right? So this is the result that they put themselves in. So I have no sympathy for it. It's just, at some point, you got to realize that going into the situation, there wasn't much of a market because, as I've always said, there's not many win-now teams that need a point guard that have assets. It was that way 4 months ago. Nothing's changed there. It was going to be tough to get back more than Miami could offer back anyway. We were saying that before the situation ever played out. We were saying that it would be a package that would disappoint people. So now that this is the route that they've gone, like, this is the package they should have expected. Now, if Miami's hardballing them to great lengths, then I don't blame them for not accepting a Dame package. It's just, it's hard to know without knowing what's on the table, and at this point, I can't have any sympathy for this organization. And assuming that Miami is giving up almost or all that they can, Portland should just bite that bullet and trade them.
Yeah, so over the last few days, I got in a discussion with someone about Cronin's free agent desires and him saying, I thought it was at the exit interviews, but it ended up being the trade deadline. So I ended up watching both of those press conferences again, unfortunately. He specifically said that they believe they could win free agent battles and stuff like that. And the trade request didn't come until the second day of free agency. And then you heard him say in his next press conference after that they weren't really, like, free agency wasn't a thing for them this year. They weren't even, like, looking at free agency very deeply. And so that's That's but he also said in there that when he said the super duper win now mode and pushing all the chips in, and we feel borderline anxious to do that, we're going to make a trade and it's going to seem like we lost the trade, but we have to do it for Dame because we owe it to him and all that stuff. He specifically went out of his way to mention that Jody and everyone above him feels that exact same way. So that was all of them saying that, I guess. But yeah, it's just crazy because he made so many comments about how he was going to do all these things and then never does them. It's just weird that he's being praised for not doing anything this summer, basically.
Like, out of all the moves he's made, the only one now move was Jeremy Grant, which Dame brought to him. Like, somebody on Twitter today said Cronin was dealt a bad hand, and I was looking at this. Like, you got the best player in franchise history, in my opinion. You got two other guys, including Jeremy Grant and Anthony Simons, two other guys that can get you 20 points per game. One of them's 23 and has been consistently getting better. Okay. So best player ever, two 20-point per game scores, two full MLEs at their disposal
Trade
the past couple of off seasons.
Oh.
What?
Never mind.
Yeah. So Dame, two other 20-plus point per game scores, two full mid-level exceptions, the third pick and the seventh pick. And you're telling me that out of all those assets, he could not acquire one single win-now piece that makes sense next to Dame? All those assets, you're telling me, after all his statements about how hell-bent he was and how obligated he was to build around Dame, build a winner around Dame, third pick, seventh pick, two full mid-level exceptions, the only piece that looked like a win-now piece that he brought in was an injured Gary Payton II who didn't want to be there and basically admitted as such before the season. I mean...
Could have signed Bruce Brown.
Could have signed Bruce Brown too. I mean, excuse me for not buying the messaging. Excuse me for thinking that maybe the messaging is planted there for a reason. Because if not, then he is absolutely horrific at executing what he wants. Horrific at executing what he wants. And now it's at the point where people are giving him props for being in a position where they've set up a great rebuild. And it's like, wow, Joe Cronin is so bad at winning now like he says he wants to do that now they have a great rebuild on their hands. Because they were so bad they got the third and seventh pick. That's literally it. How is him failing to execute on what he wants worthy of props, right? So in the end, like, I do truly think, and as we've stated multiple times before, that it's just been messaging. And I think the smartest thing this organization has done in the past year is be diligent with their messaging to get a side of this fan base to back them up on how they handled the Dame situation and moving on from the greatest player in franchise history who wanted to be here. And I think, I see that report today after they start signing guys. It's just like, man, is this the final little drop in the bucket before they ship them off to Miami? Because there was part of me that felt that way.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they had these guys, at least Knox and Reath, maybe they've just been waiting to sign, and eventually it got to the point where, like, it was rumored that Christian Wood was going to sign with Miami after a Dame trade, and Kelly Oubre, who's probably the best free agent left, right, out there. He's rumored once again today. It's been rumored for, over a month now that he is going to sign with Miami after a Dame trade. So maybe they were worried about some of these guys. Reath played pretty well in the FIBA games. Conditt actually showed some things in FIBA as well. So maybe they were afraid of another team picking him up and just they were just like, okay, we have to fill our roster spots eventually. Let's just start signing players. I mean, that's the only other case, but it's always like that with Cronin. It's always like, oh well, he had to do this, he had to do that, he did the best he could and it just didn't work out. It was like, well, at some point you're just bad at your job then.
Yeah. So I'm done buying that excuse. I don't think he failed at what he wanted. I think what he wanted is different from what he said he wanted, and he still wants the fan base on his side. That's truly what I believe about this whole situation. He wanted to move on from Dame. He wanted to go young. Jody's fine with it because it results in a cheaper team that can hopefully still sell tickets because you got up-and-coming superstar Scoot Henderson at the point guard spot to replace Dame. If anybody could replace Dame, it's Scoot, right?
And they got the hype of Sharp from a lot of people fell in love with him last year. He does cool dunks and stuff, and like most of the fan base, if you pulled them, absolutely did not want to trade Sharp, which is fair to say. I'm not saying that's the wrong thing, but they looked at Sharp last year as someone that the fans had fallen in love with and could help you move on from a Dame, and then on Scoot on top of that makes it that much better.
Yeah, and I truly believe that a large part of this fan base falls maybe a little bit too in love with their own players, which is a good and bad thing, right? Like, I like how we embrace players as a fan base for the most part, and, having that connection with players is a good thing, but I also think it's why there seems to be people out there that just kind of excuse away doing absolutely nothing. Because they don't want to move Sharp. Even if the deal made sense, even if we got Joel Embiid for like Sharp, Scoot, and assets, there would be a lot of people out there that would be upset because they became attached to Scoot the second we drafted him, and they became attached to Sharp over his rookie season. I do think that is part of the reason why doing nothing gets excused. In a city like LA, if you had this entire situation in LA, I don't think the fan base would react the same way as the people that have defended Cronin. They'd be pissed. Really, and part of it is it's LA, so they're able to land free agents a little bit easier. But, I mean, it's just unfathomable how you go into an offseason saying you want to win around Dame, how you feel like you can win free agency battles, and then you draft a point guard and then do nothing on day one of free agency, and then basically admit that you weren't really a player in free agency after the previous trade deadline. You were saying that you thought you could win free agency battles. So, well, it's just a mess, and that's why I do think that they've decided what they want to do, because I think at some point it does come down to an internal decision between, okay, do we care about our perception, or do we truly want to move on from Dame more? And I don't know what the answer to that is. So,
yeah. Well, one thing is we still kind of owe Dame for sitting out the last 10 games. Otherwise, we might not have gotten the 5th best odds, and we saw no one below 5th from 6 to 14 moved up in the draft lottery. So we still, whether we were going to make the playoffs playing or not, that's a completely different topic. But Dame sitting out allowed us to lose all those remaining games. And so you can still all point this back to Dame's willingness to sit out against his will for the good of the team was the only reason we got Scoot. It wasn't because Joe Cronin put us in a place to get him. It was because he convinced Dame to sit out by lying to him, basically. And that's why, from the beginning, I believe that Dame deserves to be traded to Miami. And on top of that, we have the situation where Miami's package is by far the only and best package available to the Blazers. So I just think at some point you got to take it. But for them to spin it against Dame, I just think is ridiculous. And I don't understand how people are buying that when Dame is the one. This has nothing to do with his contract or anything like that. He's being spun into the bad guy by, oh, he changed his mind. No, he didn't. He would do anything for the Blazers up until they turned on him. And now now it's a case where he feels like he was promised that he should be able to choose where he gets to go if this scenario ever developed, and they screwed him on that too. And so Dame is, I mean, rightfully pissed in my mind. And I don't understand why people would buy this crap that Dame's doing this to Cronin or anything like that. Dame saved Cronin's job. Like, I mean, if he didn't get Scoot this offseason and he couldn't get anything done, like, what are we sitting? We're like completely screwed. It's only because we have Scoot right now that there's any hope after a Dame trade. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And Taylor Packer has a great comment that I want to read off, and then I'll get to these donos. He says, it's crazy to think that this roster is what the plan was in other people's minds. It's a complete mess, LOL.
Yeah.
Dame essentially needs to leave for it to make any sense. And, like, that's exactly how I feel. If you guys have watched me, you know that I always want to ride or die with Dame and, like, do right by him and give him a chance to contend, and I was, like, all in on that. But at this point, I tweeted out a rotation, like, you're either starting 3 guards or you're bringing 2 of Damian Lillard, Anthony Simons, Scoot Henderson, and Shaedon Sharpe off the bench? Like, what, if you're going to bring your 3rd pick off the bench, you should have just traded it in an overpayment like you said you were obligated to do for Dame. Like, how does this roster make any sense in a way that's supposed to win basketball games? If he drafted Scoot and then, like, pulled off some sort of OG Anunoby trade or something, even if it was for Sharpe and it felt like an overpayment, at least it would make some sort of sense. Like, okay, we still want to win around Dame. Then maybe I'd sit here and say, okay, well, maybe you just couldn't find a trade that made sense for the 3rd pick and wanted Scoot instead of Sharpe. And didn't want to trade the 3rd pick for Anunoby, was more willing to trade Sharpe, but still did it, even though it looks like an overpay, like he told us. It's them pushing their chips in, right? If that was the case, I would understand it. But, I mean, this roster, just try and fill out a lineup if you believe this roster was the plan. Because basically, if Dame comes back and plays, you have to play Sharpe as a full-time small forward. And then what? You're still bringing one of Dame, Ant, or Scoot off the bench. A lot of people say Ant, but he's blossoming into a star, in my opinion. He averaged 21 points per game last year on solid efficiency, 4 assists. You don't bring that dude off the bench at 23 years old after a season like that. You let him continue to grow. You don't cap that, because there's a true chance that he becomes an all-star level talent. Now, maybe he stays this player for the rest of his career, but he's 23. Maybe, 24 now? Like, turns 24 this season? He's still very young. He's still improving. You do not cap that, okay? So bringing him off the bench, I think, is a really bad idea, because you want to give him the opportunity to continue to grow in the way that he's grown the past couple of years. You don't bring your 3rd overall pick off the freaking bench when it's Scoot Henderson, who would go number 1 in other drafts. You don't, like, what? Dame, the whole plan was to bring your best player ever off the bench? Is that the whole plan to win? To bring Dame off the bench? Like, what was the plan for the roster, right? So people could sit here and say, oh, well, they didn't have a good trade for the 3rd pick. Okay, well then there was a bunch of other moves that could have been made to make this roster make some sort of sense, and it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, and they had, we just talked about Christian Wood and Kelly Oubre, who aren't the best players and not the greatest fits here. But if you're trying to win, we had our mid-level exception still. Like, why? Those guys are obviously Wood signed for like $3 million or something. We could have basically doubled that offer. And same with Oubre is going to end up signing for the minimum. So there are players still out there as of a week ago that they could have signed. But like, from what I've heard, they've had no interest in signing those guys, like even players better than that from the beginning. And then you get to this point in the season, and no offense to Duop Reath, who's like, he could still be a good player, and Moses Brown and stuff like that, but like, you basically wasted any opportunities to get a competent center that you could depend on, and now you're going with a bunch of unknowns and stuff. Like what are we doing? Especially if Nurk's part of a trade, a Dame trade too. What do we have going on at center? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not the best roster construction. And as of a couple weeks ago, before we signed Moses Brown, we had still the same problem we've been talking about since the beginning of Blazers Uprise, and that's like no front court depth. And it's frustrating.
Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, that's why I'm kind of just like, all right, well, get Dame to Miami, because the roster just doesn't make a ton of sense. Obviously, there's still part of me that wants to see Dame in a Blazer uniform, but like the roster was set up to trade Dame. Mm-hmm. Like the way the roster is right now was set up to trade Dame. It was set up in no other way other than to trade Dame. The roster was set up to go young. It just was. Like, as I've said, couldn't turn the 3rd pick, the 7th pick, 2 full mid-level exceptions, the 23rd pick, future first, couldn't turn any of that into help that made sense for Dame. The only talent that the Blazers were able to get this offseason, true talent, is a 19-year-old point guard. Like, it's just you can't make it up. So I think that they still trade Dame. Just kind of tie it back to, like, you know, kind of what's current right now in this time of year. I had a prediction September 16th on Twitter. I still stand by that prediction. It might not happen, though. I've been saying I think it will be a miracle, and I'll be absolutely shocked if Dame's in camp. I'm starting to lean away from that towards, I guess there's a chance.
What was your prediction on Twitter? Like the 14th or 15th or something?
The 16th, yeah. So this Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, Saturday is my prediction. Which I should have made it on a Friday. It's going to happen on the 15th because it's going to be a Friday because we always got to do things on Fridays. But
David Lester said earlier, Cronin doesn't want to be the guy who traded away a generational talent, period, GMing led by fear. And that's absolutely true as well. They were scared to death to trade Scoot or Sharp and then have them become a star. But that just goes back to then just trade Dame then, man. Like just trade him then and move on if you think those guys are stars. But Cronin, this is another thing he has said himself, his own words. The easy part is tearing it down and being bad and doing that process. The hard part is building it back up. And so far, he's shown he can do the easy part, but he hasn't shown any sort of inclination to do the hard part. And it's just, I think we're going to look back. Hopefully, this all works out because I'd still love for the young guys to eventually win a championship. I'm still going to be a Blazer fan and all that stuff. But at one of the most critical times with our whether you want to say he's the best player of all time or at worst the 3rd best player in Blazers history, in the middle of his prime, we hired an inexperienced GM with no search for a GM.
Yeah. I was watching back the Olshey Fired stream, and we were like talking about all these candidates. I was like, did we mention Cronin at all during this entire stream?
Yeah, and so I think that's going to be one of the key moments in Blazers history, is that at a time where we really needed someone with, our ownership situation and all that, someone who would come in and just be a hammer down guy with a plan and knows how to execute a plan and go for it. Would things have worked out better? Would they have been worse? Who knows? If Scoot and Sharp are stars, I guess you could always argue that. But once again, just move on from Dame then and let those guys, give those guys the best chance to be stars as possible. And I think that's getting them as many reps and minutes as possible starting right now. And so that's why I just think it's better to just move on.
They're going to have to make a decision. My gut says that I'm going to look on Twitter at some point in the next week and a half to 2 weeks, and we're going to see a Damian Lillard has been traded to the Miami Heat trade, and it'll be like, okay, well, we got 3 firsts? Oh, only 3 firsts? Is that one of those for Hero? We get Jovic, we get Hawkes, and oh, that's it. They keep Hero. That's my gut feeling.
Really?
Yeah, that's my gut feeling. Like, they'll renegotiate the protections on the pick with OKC to get us an extra first, and OKC will do it because it gets Dame out of the West. And that's we'll see 3 firsts, 3 Miami firsts, Jovic, Hawkes, and then like Kyle Lowry. And then we'll cut Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, I'd actually be surprised if they kept Hero. I wouldn't be surprised if Hero goes to some random team we haven't talked about much, because I still look at it like he'd be a great fit in Philly, for example. But I don't think Philly's helping Miami get Dame. Same with Brooklyn. Like, I don't think there's many Eastern Conference teams that are willing to take Hero so that Miami gets Dame, because that's pretty scary there. So I think I do want the 4 first. That's going to be the big determination.
3 for Miami and then 1 from a third team for Hero. That's the goal.
Yeah.
If it's less than 4, it's a bummer. I mean, you said you'd be surprised, but truly think about it, Eric. Would you be surprised to have that feeling after a Joe Cronin trade? We're like, wow.
No, not to have that feeling. I'm just saying, like if we just let them off the hook, like, what are we doing? Like, it doesn't make sense to not.
But that's the only feeling we've ever had.
Like, even if you're just getting expirings and a 2nd round pick for Hero, it doesn't make sense to let Miami keep him in that scenario, right?
Exactly why it will happen. If I told you the return that we got from Robert Covington and Norman Powell before that trade deadline, you would have been like, you would have joined the Jack Ramseys. You would have left.
Yeah, it's true. You
would have left, and then you would have come back like, I'm sorry. It was so dumb. I didn't think it was real. So
All Good says 4 firsts is beyond optimistic. How? It's optimistic for a GM like Joe. I agree. It's not optimistic when we're talking about trading Dame to the place he wants to go to. Like, it's not even that much of a trade for Miami. That doesn't make any sense.
It's not beyond optimistic. It's what it should be.
And this is why that's the other thing I heard in Joe's press conference too. Rich from Rip City Retro, I saw him in chat. What's up, Rich? He like mocked Joe for this so bad in that video he did with all the press conferences. But so Joe says, I call a team once and then they say he's not available, and then I might try again a couple weeks later, and if they say no, then I just realize that player's off the board or whatever. Which is, he should have had that approach the opposite way, right? And this is what is frustrating to me about the whole, they haven't talked since Summer League or before Summer League, or they haven't really, negotiated that much. And that's why I think Joe messed this up. And he should have said, you're the GM. You can look at Miami's team and say, your part of this package has to include 3 firsts, Jovic, Hawkes, and an expiring contract like Lowry. It has to. I don't want to hear you call me back until your part of that package includes those things. And on top of that, you need to get at least a first from Hero or Caleb Martin or however you want to do it. I need 4 first swaps and the 2 young guys and expirings. And I will trade you Dame if you get me that. But from the beginning, he's been like, I'm going to try to drum up interest with other teams, so I'm going to play hardball and do all this kind of stuff. they need to find a way to do that. And if he would have been proactive and known that he was taking Scoot, he could have gotten the 18th pick, and we could have gotten an extra pick. We could have drafted someone other than Jaquez if he didn't want Jaquez or whatever the case is. But Jaquez is probably worth close to a protected first somewhere too, so you could probably get a first that way.
I'd hope that he would have first round value, considering they just drafted him in the first round. But then again, Keon Johnson.
Yeah, so this is just a case of I mean, it just doesn't seem like the Blazers even told them what they wanted. So you had to be the guy in charge of the Dame trade, and instead, it seems like if they're being lowballed by Emmy, it's because they let it get to a point where now Dame will only report to Miami, right? Is what's being reported. So if they only get the 2028 and 2030 first and Lowry and Jovic or something, and that's it, and we're sitting here talking about like he didn't even bother having them change the protections on that pick or whatever. That's just a case of, I'm sorry, you're just not a good GM if that's how you set this up without demanding the things. And that's why, I mean, Masai Ujiri has been a complete disaster to deal with, but at least you have to give up the farm to frickin' get any of his players, and you're not going to just get someone cheaply. So at least that going into negotiations, he makes that very clear. I've said this on the stream many times. The Blazers inquired about Siakam last year, and he specifically told them to not even call back unless he had Sharp, Ant, Nas, and 3 future firsts at minimum in the negotiations. And if you don't even have that much, I don't even want to talk to you about it. And that's exactly how Cronin should have done that. And then he can just say, from there on out, the ball is in your court, dude. Dame is yours if you do this, or we'll just keep him and screw you guys if you're not willing to do that, because Dame's the top 75 player of all time, and he wants to play for you guys. You guys desperately need him, and that's just how he should have gone about it, instead of playing this, I'm just not going to talk to them. I'm going to ignore their calls for months and see what happens and hope that another team comes in and makes them up their offer. That's not how you negotiate, man.
Yeah. Make them give up their best deal or keep playing hardball, even if it drags onto the season. Because I do agree with the comment that was stated in chat. The downside of keeping Dame into the season might be a little bit overstated. Then again, maybe not. Because, I mean, you're going to have to play him in 35 minutes a game. I think Sharp playing some full-time 3 at this point in his career, I don't think that's going to hurt him. I don't think Scoot having to learn how to play next to a star at this point in his career is going to hurt him. It's just those guys got to get minutes, because that is the priority next season, with or without Dame. They're not going to make noise. So that, unless they trade those guys for Joel Embiid, which, guess what? If they're looking great, then it's a lot easier to trade those guys at the deadline for Joel Embiid if you still have Dame. You know what I mean? In any scenario, even the most ludicrous ones, maybe we get Embiid with Dame, which is just absolutely ludicrous. It's not going to happen. But even in that scenario, it still makes sense to focus on developing these young guys, with or without Dame being here. I don't think Dame holds them back from that as much as other people do, but obviously there's an elephant in the room if Dame's here. And how do you handle media day? It's just going to be a circus going on to the season. But if Miami's not offering what Eric said, then that's kind of what you have to do at this point. But then again, they picked this path. There wasn't a huge market out there for them. Maybe they thought it'd be a little bit easier because, Miami will give up their best package because there will be multiple teams and they're going to have to bid for him. So we'll be able to get this. And obviously, with Miami being the only team Dame wants to go to, maybe they're not. But in that situation, you play hardball. It's just that simple. And maybe that's what he's doing. And in that case, that's where there's a chance that Dame ends up in training camp. And we get to go through that mess, which would be kind of fun to cover in 3 weeks or whatever. But I still think it comes down to they end up moving him. I truly wonder what for. There's another comment in chat I wanted to respond, but I forget. Chris R says, why do you think Sharania specifically mentioned Toronto? I thought that was a little interesting, to be honest, because Toronto is the type of team that, A, if they want to actually contend with this roster, needs a player like Dame. B, we've seen Masai Ujiri do it before with a guy who supposedly didn't want to be there and he won a championship with them. So if there is one team, it would be Toronto, but like, what are they giving up is the question, because Scotty Barnes and they can only give up 3 firsts, right? Is that really that much better than 4 firsts?
They technically have to change the protections because they owe the pick they owe San Antonio goes for a few years, I think.
Yeah, so they changed protections on that. So Scotty Barnes on 3 firsts, is that much better than Hawkes, Jovic, and 4 firsts? I know a lot of people are high on Scotty, but Scotty doesn't make much sense to me because here, let me just say why I don't think Scotty makes sense, and then I'll let you go, and then we'll read these donuts. Scotty doesn't make much sense to me with Scoot, because if you're gonna get a forward like that, you either want the guy to be so good with the ball in his hands that like it justifies taking it out of Scoot's and Sharp's and Ant's hands and putting it in that guy's hands. I don't think Scotty Barnes is that level of prospect to justify that. So if you have a forward prospect that's not that level of guy, then you want him to be good playing off the ball, playing off those guys. You either want a guy that's good enough to justify taking the ball out of their hands and putting them in that forward's hands, or you want a forward that can play off of them. I don't think Scotty Barnes is either of those, right? If Scotty Barnes is a better three-point shooter, better off-the-ball player, then fine. And then all the extra ball in his hand stuff is just kind of extra. But he has kind of become a player that needs the ball in his hands a bit too much for me to feel comfortable with, like, yeah, that's what we need in return for Dame. That's where Jovic is a better off-ball player, like, has some skill upside with the ball in his hands. Offensively, I'm not, Jovic is nowhere near as proven, but the fit's a little cleaner. I would take Scotty in a vacuum, but when you're talking about getting an extra first and Hawkes on top of that, like, is the Toronto package really head and shoulders better? If I had to pick one, I would maybe still pick the Toronto package, but it's not like that's clearly a better deal, in my opinion, like a lot of people would think. But since it's not Miami, that's what they'll think.
You can get more for Barnes if you wanted a third team to be involved, probably.
How much are you going to get for him, though?
I think you can get
3 firsts?
I don't know about 3, but at least a couple of good firsts and maybe a good young player. But
let's just say this. Young player cancels out with Hawkes, all right? So then if you're able to get 5 firsts back from 3 from Toronto and 2 flipping Scotty for something, 5 firsts versus 4 firsts and Jovic.
Yeah, I'm taking the 5 firsts probably.
But that's very comparable.
Well, I just want to say this. I might have to go back and listen to it, but I'm pretty sure Shams mentioned Toronto because he was mentioning the Kawhi Leonard situation. Not because of Toronto having to do anything with Dame. He was just bringing up Toronto as a team that did take a chance on someone in the past that did that, and it worked out really well for them. So I don't think Toronto was mentioned by Shams specifically because they have any interest in Dame. I think he was just saying unless a team like Toronto that has done it in the past and traded for someone that didn't want to be there does that, then they would. But that it didn't have anything to do with them being interested in Damian Lillard.
And who's to say you'd even get 3 firsts and Barnes from Toronto if they were interested? Andrew Brown says, I think... Go ahead.
They weren't willing to go at Barnes for KD last year. So.
Yeah, they're super high on Barnes. So expecting Barnes and 3 firsts is kind of probably asking too much of Ujiri, who wants to fleece everyone. That's the whole thing in this situation that it comes back to, too, is... There's really not a destination out there that's going to give you a head and shoulders, a package that's head and shoulders above what Miami can offer in their best deal. Like, people say New Orleans, okay, maybe you can get 6, 7 firsts. 4 firsts, Jovic and Hawkes is, in my opinion, the value of like 6 firsts and nothing else. Jovic and Hawkes, I think, are each worth about a first-round pick, and then if you get 4 other firsts, especially in 2028, in 2030 unprotected from Miami when they have a legitimate chance of being bad then. I mean, in order for a package from like New Orleans to be head and shoulders above, now not every first is equal, but just kind of like speaking in hypothetical, you'd have to get 8 firsts. The Blazers are not getting 8 firsts for Damian Lillard. They're just not. I don't think it was going to happen even if Dame didn't make this play to Miami. That's just kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, and DJ Vegas says Miami could struggle in the regular season like they did last year, could put more pressure on them to up their offer. But what I just don't understand this thing that they're lowballing us. Like, why would they be lowballing us right now? Like, they want Dame. They know they don't have the greatest package. Why would they be giving less than a not great package? That doesn't make any sense to me. They've been willing to trade their picks in the past. It's not a case of they overvalue their picks or anything like that. They've proven that they can find guys without having draft picks. They probably have a diamond in the rough in Orlando Robinson right now, and Haywood Highsmith as well could provide some minutes for guys they trade out, and they always find guys like that. I just don't get that. I don't buy this thing that Miami's not offering very much for them, or not willing to offer much right now, or is playing hardball or whatever. But I also think that that's risky, because if they play well and get off to a good start, you also lose the one team that's actually willing to trade something for Dame right now. And if they back out eventually, or let's just say they trade for someone else, and then don't need Dame anymore, you're literally sitting there with no options for Damian Lillard, like no valid options. So then what do you do? So it is risky to do that.
Then what does Dame want?
Right, yeah.
Maybe the Blazers want that so that Dame can say, all right, screw it, I'll go here and here. I don't know. Like, basically, Portland is not in... Either Portland's made up their mind, or they're not in control. Because if they haven't made up their mind to trade Dame, they're basically keeping him on a twinge of hope that somehow something better will come along down the line. But there's no way of knowing what. So... It's just a mess. And let me take these donuts we've been putting off. Shout out Oscar, $5 donut says, do you think the Mavs would want Grant in exchange for a package around Derek Lively? So that's a solid question. It depends on how Lively looks next year, but I think Lively will look great. Just a pick and roll athletic big next to Kyrie and Luka. And I think he'll be solid defensively off the bat. I think Lively's exactly what they need. I don't think that they're going to move off him for Grant. And they would have to trade out other salary to match Grant's enormous contract now. So, but if you could, I would, in a heartbeat right now, trade Grant straight up for Derek Lively. In a heartbeat.
Yeah, considering the rebuild, I agree. But that's the type of thing. Like, if we trade Dame sooner, get the assets... You maybe, like, let's just say we had 18 and 23, right? Lively goes 12. You can maybe, between, one of those picks or both of 18 and 23 and a future first or something, maneuver your way up the board a little bit. We saw, Dallas buy a pick by taking on a contract. We saw... that led to Omax Prosper, your guy. Yeah. We saw Dallas at 10 move back and still get Lively. Like, those are the kind of guys we should have been targeting with some of the assets in a Dame trade, instead of like whatever, like worrying about it later. That's why I 100%. Would have been proactive about it.
You know what might have been even better? Staying at 18, taking Cam Whitmore, just taking a flyer on him, and then taking Leonard Miller at 23. You know how much better I would feel about this upcoming rebuild if we had Cam Whitmore and Leonard Miller instead of Jaime Jaquez and Chris Murray? Because those guys are like win now players that will be role guys, whereas Leonard Miller, Cam Whitmore, I think have much higher upsides, especially Cam Whitmore.
Or maybe you trade Jovic and one of those picks to get up for Lively, because like Jovic seems like a good fit for Dallas as well. So
yeah, I mean you have options. You have options if you're proactive. At this point, yeah, that's the only hope of getting Lively is if they really wanted Jeremy Grant. But we would probably say, I mean, that's hoping for too much though, because when was the last time we re-signed a Blazer on a 5-year deal that was looked at as maybe a little bit of an overpay? What did we get back for? Keon Johnson in seconds. So, like we're gonna get back like Marcus Sasser in seconds. That's the equivalent. I'm trying to think of like the name I like least at the back end of this first round, because actually I like pretty much all of them. I really like this draft, you know.
I like Sasser, but he's a guard.
I know. Exactly. That's why I went with them. Jalen Pickett in seconds. All right. That's what I would expect. Oscar, $10 dono. Second dono. Thank you, Oscar. Appreciate you, bro. I thanked him earlier in chat because I wanted to have that conversation before we kind of dove into this. Second, is there a world where Ant starts as the primary ball handler with Sharp at the 2 and Scoot comes off the bench? I just think Ant is his best self with the ball in his hands. Okay, if we trade Dame and still don't start Scoot, you guys might see me have an aneurysm on stream, bro. Like, there ain't no way. There ain't no way. I understand, like, Ant looks better when he's the starting point guard. I mean, that's on a tanking team where he doesn't have much help and just has, like, free reign. Most guys like that are going to look better. Ant's never going to be that guy that carries that sort of team to anything, like, meaningful. Like, he needs another dude next to him. So even though Ant individually looks better in a crummy situation, you have to have a crummy situation in order for him to, like, be that guy with no help around him. You don't want that, right? Like, I want Ant on a good team where he plays a big role on a good team. Maybe is still even a star on a good team. And that comes probably with him at the 2 next to a point guard like Scoot, if those two can figure it out defensively, which maybe they have a chance to. So,
yeah, I just look at it like, well, like even if Scoot plays 36 minutes a game, Ant's still going to be the backup ball handler. And, I mean, you can split it to where Scoot plays a little bit off ball. You've been saying he needs to learn that anyway. So, you let both of them have like split it 50-50. So, like, half the game, Scoot's the primary ball handler, half the game. Ant is half of that half. The other person isn't even on the court, so you're fine. The other half, you're learning to play off the ball. And I actually think it's kind of dumb to pigeonhole Anthony into just an on-ball player, considering how good of a shooter he is. I think he spaces the floor. I think that's been one of the things that people often overlook with our small backcourt. Is just the fact that you can't leave Anthony, just like you couldn't leave CJ wide open unless he's standing near the sideline. But you just couldn't leave those guys open, and it helps space the floor. Same a little bit like when they started actually putting Melo like in the corner or whatever, like in the bubble, when he hit a bunch of like clutch threes and stuff. That kind of spacing, it's Grant was off to a great start shooting last year, and it helped space the floor. And it's not a coincidence that Dame has been so efficient because of the spacing on offense. And if you let Scoot have that same spacing, and he's able to get maybe he's a little bit stronger or more of a bully. He's going to have to learn how to get to the rim in the NBA, but I think that's one thing that we can all agree that Scoot should be able to, despite his questionable shooting, he should, at his peak, at least be at Dame's level in terms of getting to the paint, mid-range game and getting to the basket. So with his athleticism and his length, I don't question that at all. So you want shooters spacing the floor. So I think the game's going to be easy for Anthony this year, both having the pressure off of him of having to play or fit in with Dame, and then also just the opportunities that Scoot will provide without that pressure.
Yeah, and we got to stop looking at it like black and white in terms of like he needs the ball in his hands versus he doesn't have the ball in his hands. Like on any good team, you're going to have multiple good players that are going to play with the ball in their hands and play with the ball not in their hands. There's 5 players on the court, which means at one time, one player has the ball, 4 players don't have the ball. Like Scoot, if he ever wins a championship, there's going to be a big portion of that championship where he's playing off the ball, where he's playing off another really good player, right? Like you want your star players to be able to play off of each other. That's kind of the calculation in terms of like bringing in forwards. As I said with Scotty Barnes, I just don't like him playing off of Scoot, Ant, Sharp. You already got a lot of creation there. If you only had one guard, then okay, sure, fine. But you have a lot of mouths to feed. That's what it becomes in terms of like you need guys that can do both, but at some point you kind of reach a maximum in terms of creation within the starting lineup. Like at some point you need a guy that can just play off guys more so than you need a guy that can create or need a guy that can do this or that. So it's kind of a balance, and it depends on what else you have. As far as Scoot and Ant, the only way this rebuild works is if Scoot and Ant play well next to each other. Because if they don't play well next to each other, Ant's probably not going to look too good, and then you're probably not going to get much back in a trade for him, and then you're just all in on Scoot and Sharp. Maybe you can get lucky with the draft lottery or whatever, but it would be very beneficial for this rebuild if those two play well off of each other, and I think that's the only option in a Dame trade is to give those two the chance. Honestly, I'd start Scoot at the 3 too. Start all 3 of those guys together and see what it looks like and see where it's good, see where it struggles. Might learn a thing or two about combinations of players. So, shout out Polly Ross, $5 dono says, sending $5 to remind that Knox averaged 88 points per 36 minutes in the 2022 playoffs with Atlanta. A per 36 merchant. Thank you, Polly Ross, for the $5 dono. I appreciate you. Let's talk about Knox, because I had a tweet, and some people didn't like it. I found a Kevin Knox stand, by the way. Kind of reminded me of a Cam Reddish stand. It was very weird. Okay. Re-signing Kevin Knox, to me, is completely pointless. Completely pointless. It's not something that I'm upset that they did it. I just don't understand the point. Because we need, like, good long-term forwards that can start. In terms of, like, other forwards, like non-starting forwards and subpar forwards, we actually have a slight little bit of a logjam, and if we make a Dame trade with Miami, we're going to have a serious logjam. Because if we keep Dame, Sharp's going to have to be a full-time small forward, just in order to get our core 4 guys minutes. So Sharp's going to be a full-time small forward, then you have Matisse Thybulle there, who they just re-signed, and you have Nasir Little there still. And then at the power forward spot, you got Jeremy Grant, Chris Murray, who just spent a first-round pick on, is supposedly NBA ready, and Jabari Walker, who I think might deserve a little bit of a chance next year. I mean, that's the 6 guys right there at the 3 and 4 positions. None of them would be moving up or down, right? Like, none of those guys are really going to play center. Maybe Chris Murray plays a little bit of center, but like on an optimal team, none of those guys are going to play center. Sharp, if Dame stays, is not going to be playing guard. unless they screw up minutes, and that's a bigger problem. But if they trade Dame and get back Jovic and Hawkes, you got Sharp still maybe playing some 3. You got Thibault, you got Nasir Little, you got Jaime Hawkes, you still got Jeremy Grant, now you got Nikola Jovic, and you got Chris Murray, and you got Jabari Walker, and you're just adding Kevin Knox to that. Like, what's the point? What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. The first thing I thought of was, hopefully this isn't a partial guarantee. So, I mean, at this point, maybe you're just signing them. He could have been holding out to sign a non-guaranteed contract until he knew for sure there wasn't any other offers.
I forgot Ryan Rupert. Sorry. I forgot Ryan Rupert, man.
Yeah, why would you want to give him minutes, right?
Anyway, go on.
So, yeah, the first thing I thought of is, why, if you're going to bring him back, why draft Chris Murray? Why have Jabari Walker still? Why re-sign Jeremy Grant? It's like, those 3 guys, I mean, Kevin Knox is like, hopefully a poor man's version of any 3 of those guys, right? So I don't think he's, I mean, if he's better than any of those 3, we're in trouble, right? I don't know. He's not a good defender.
He's not a long-term piece. If he is like a long-term project that if he hits is a starting caliber forward, sure.
See,
sure. He's 5 years into his career. He's literally in the mold of like lottery pick that didn't pan out, Mario Hezonja type of guy.
Yeah. Yeah, Randy says you're upset for not having front court depth in the first half and now upset about too much depth in the front court after a Dame trade. Okay, so here's my thinking. In my opinion, they're still very questionable at center. I feel like they have enough depth between, Thibault, Nas, Sharp, Chris, Jabari, Jeremy at forward. So, to me, I would have done what they then did after the Knox signing, which started to make a little more sense. And that's use all your roster spots to sign like 6 centers and hope that 2 of them pan out and you can add them to your roster this offseason. So I would have just kept signing, like, the Kings went after JaVale McGee, so it doesn't seem like they really wanted to bring Keita back. So I would have taken a chance on him. We could have signed him to a pretty reasonable contract. I don't think anyone would have. I don't think Sacramento matches on if you give him like 3 years guaranteed at a pretty like $3 million a season or something. So I would have just been doing stuff like that, and so that's like when we kept our draft picks, re-signed Thibault and Jeremy. I really, unless we're winning and wanted to upgrade one of our our small forwards, starting small forward spot, it doesn't make sense to add more players to that aren't like two-way or like G League players. It would make more sense for that. So, and then we have all these guards too that we still have on Exhibit 10 contracts, most of which I think are borderline questionable, even like G League players. Where the heck is Skylar Mays in all this? Like,
yeah,
why didn't we just sign Skylar Mays to one of those spots, screw all these other guards, and then sign the rest of them, be like big men or whatever, and get some big man depth. Finally have like 3 or 4 centers on the roster that we can go through. We can send them down. We still have an open two-way as well. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it still could happen. Knox could end up on the remix instead of the Blazers, which is fine. but I don't know.
The point of all these, there's a comment that says, the point of all these moves is to have bodies and suck for the next 2 years. Well, like, exactly, so, like, it's pointless for a reason, is how I'd put it. People gotta understand there's a difference between having depth in terms of starting caliber players or near starting caliber players and having depth in terms of fringe second/third string players. Because we don't need forward depth in terms of fringe second string, but more so third string caliber players. We have a bunch of those. We have a bunch of those guys. We have a lack of depth in terms of like quality forwards is the problem. And we have a lack of depth in terms of centers. Right? Like so Knox is completely pointless because on a win now team, he's not going to help you win games. It doesn't make sense on a win now team. He just hasn't proven to help a team in his 5 years in the league ever win basketball games. On a rebuilding team, and if it's a rebuilding team, you assume that Dame gets traded, there's so many more players at his position that you would prioritize. Like, I would prioritize all 6 of those guys I named. I would play Sharp at the 3 in order to start him with Scoot and Ant. I would rather prioritize Nasir Little. He's a little bit younger and has been injury plagued and I think still has more upside. I'd rather prioritize Jabari Walker, seeing what he can become. Chris Murray, Nikola Jovic, Jaime Jaquez. In a rebuild, I prioritize all those guys over Kevin Knox. I'd even prioritize Ryan Rupert, the 19-year-old, over Kevin Knox in a rebuild because it's a rebuild. Okay? In a rebuild, you prioritize your young project guys who you have hope could develop into something over a 5-year vet who like maybe can have a solid game once in a while, and that's about it. Because it's a rebuild. So that's the whole thing. It's just a pointless move to bring him back. Like, I would rather go out and get a guy who's worse than Kevin Knox, but maybe has a chance, maybe it's an undrafted guy, maybe has a chance of turning into something. Because in past years, like, I wanted to sign Orlando Robinson when he was undrafted free agent. I wanted to sign Austin Reaves. I wanted to sign Naz Reid. I was high on all those guys. Lou Dort as well in our first stream ever. After that draft. Our first stream ever was a 2019 draft. After the draft, I was saying, man, Lou Dort on a 2-way would be amazing. I don't know how he went undrafted. So, the thing is we've never really gotten those players. We've always settled for the high draft pick from 5 years ago who's a bust. Mm-hmm. This is just what it's always been. It doesn't ever pan out into anything. Knox is not going to be on the team in 2 to 3 years. It's just a pointless signing. It fills a roster spot. That's literally the only point.
And if we're going to go for busts, why not take busts from more recent drafts that still have a chance to pan out? Both Ty Washington and Usman Garuba got cut.
Exactly. And
one looks like it's going to, or I don't know if Garuba signed overseas, but it looks like he is going to sign overseas. And Ty signed a 2-way in Milwaukee. So we still have an open 2-way spot, and we need, to fill out our G League team. So I don't understand why you don't go for that. But on top of that, I would be saying right now, you have to think that you use that draft pick on Chris Murray. So you can't be saying right now that we still need to find another power forward or whatever, like prospect off the scrap heap or whatever. And Rupert is long enough to play either forward position as well. So you have guys that can play that position that are young and that you just drafted. So to me, that's if you're signing guys like Knox at their position, that's like not really showing a lot of confidence in your moves so far. And once again, Knox could be a non-guaranteed, so they could just waive him. This is a moot point. But that's why I'm signing, like I'd much rather sign George Conditt and Duop Reath than Kevin Knox, because at least then, if one of these guys turns out to be a good signing and a diamond in the rough type of guy, you at least have that at a position of need. Whereas if Kevin Knox develops or he has a breakout season, looks really good in training camp, is our training camp MVP, like Keon or whatever, or Trendon Watford, right?
Yeah.
And gets minutes, or like then he's like untouchable by the Blazers, and then all of a sudden he's taking minutes from guys you just drafted and just refused to trade to make Damian Lillard happy. So I just, to me,
if he breaks out,
shouldn't have drafted Chris Murray. If they thought he had a chance of breaking out, they should not have drafted Chris Murray then.
Well, if they thought he had a chance to break out, they had him under contract for $3 million this year. Like, that's barely above the minimum anyway. And they cut him
team option.
They cut him. So he wasn't. They didn't think enough of him to sign him for $3 million. So, but like signing him for $2 million, that's enough to like be like, yeah, this guy is gonna be awesome or whatever, you know.
People are saying relax. I'm not mad about it. I just think it's pointless. For anybody that disagrees, please tell me what the point of it is. Other than he's just filling a roster spot. And don't say, oh, well, maybe he could end up being okay because we already have a bunch of those guys.
So what's the point?
What's the point?
Randy, you're completely missing the point, man. He says they better not sign anyone for a minimum at this point. I just literally said to use all the minimums on big men. And
I literally said if it's a younger forward undrafted guy that has multiple years in front of him so that you can try and develop him at some point. Maybe you flush out one of Chris Murray or Jabari Walker. At least you have a runway in time to develop that guy, like a Ryan Rupert. That makes sense. So sign a guy like that to a minimum. You know what I mean? The thing is you kind of missed the boat on some guys because you waited until September. But that's the entire point. It's just pointless. Like, what's the point? Mm-hmm. What's the point?
Hey, guess what? Maybe he's got a plan. Maybe the GM actually has a plan, and maybe you guys just don't know what it is. Maybe you should just wait and hold on. Dude, screw that. I'm so sick of giving Cronin the passive waiting. He has a plan, just wait. Cronin sucks. He has no plan.
It's September 11th. We're talking about Monday Night Football happened tonight. Regular season.
Cronin is in over his head. He is incompetent as a GM. He does not know what he's doing. He lucked into Scoot and Sharp, so thankfully he has those guys. But he was smart enough. The only thing I'll give him credit for is he was smart enough to hire really good assistant GMs like Mike Schmitz, who can handle the draft and stuff like that. So, but even a guy like Mike Schmitz isn't going to hit on every pick, so you're still gonna miss some. And I don't understand giving him a pass for anything he's done. He literally did nothing.
Somebody please tell me who disagrees with us. Somebody please tell me what the point of the Kevin Knox signing is. Please tell me. What's the point? What's the point? Also, I'm going to do a chat poll. Is there a point? Is there a point?
And people are saying to tank. Well, but if we're tanking,
why aren't we playing Kevin Knox to tank?
Why aren't we playing Chris Murray then? Like, why not? Is Chris Murray too good to tank? Like, why would we not play a 23-year-old rookie in a tanking season over him? So, like, he's not going to play, right?
We literally have our entire Summer League starting lineup ready to go in a tank. You guys saw how they choked to Houston in the first Summer League game? That team will tank just fine.
Oh, man. Okay, we got a lot of people in chat. I just don't understand. Mike says, he actually won a trade, quoting me, Torian the Grant trade, but yeah, Cronin sucks. He has at least done something a little. Well, if you've actually listened to me, you've heard me say multiple times that, and this is the truth, by the way, Grant leveraged the last year of his deal with Detroit to come to Portland because Dame recruited him. Because Dame's close with him. They played at the Olympics together. And Grant had a handshake deal when he signed in Detroit that they would trade him where he wants to go. Circumstances made that trade happen more than anything. That's just factual. Like, I don't give Cronin a ton of credit for that reason. I give Dame more credit. Dame, as a GM, Eric, might have done more win now moves since Cronin became GM to help surround himself with talent to win now. Because I give Dame more credit for Grant than Joe Cronin. Dame made that happen. What's Joe Cronin's best win now move? Signing an injured Gary Payton? I mean, come on. Come on now.
I mean, we gave Cronin credit for that trade too, but he has said multiple times, at least 4 different times since then, probably more, that he needs to do more to win, and he hasn't done a single thing since then. Not one. Everything's been... And even the Gary Payton signing, he was injured and needed surgery, and he signed him anyway, and got us hard capped.
Yeah.
To the trade, the Kevin Knox trade, you said. You should have put signing.
I'm too distracted. Is there a point to the Kevin Knox signing? Yes or no? Just because I don't think there's a point doesn't mean I hate Kevin Knox. Alright? I just don't understand the point. Is there a point to the Kevin Knox signing? For those of you voting yes, please explain what the point is. I just don't understand it. Like, here's the thing. We're going to have to transition into we're in a rebuild mindset. And I still think some people are struggling to get their mindset there. Truly. Truly. Because Todd Keith says he provides size. He plays a forward position. We need size at the center position, but also, at this point, we're in a rebuild. Who cares if we have size or not? We need to find our long-term starting center. Guess what? That's not Kevin Knox. That's different than we need size, because we're not going to win games next year. We're not going to win we're in rebuild mode. So, if we're small, it doesn't really matter, because we're not really focused on winning games. We need size in terms of legitimate big men, not Kevin Knox. He's a tanker. We're going to be bad anyway. And if we're good, it's a great thing. And then, okay, fine. Here's the thing. If we're a playoff team next year after trading Dame, we probably don't need to tank because that's how good our young guards are developing. So, anyway, go ahead.
You theoretically have 3 players at every position, right? I know some players can play multiple positions, right?
Yeah.
Theoretically, though, 3 players at each position, right?
Yeah. Preferably like a first-string caliber guy, a second-string caliber guy, and a third-string caliber guy.
Yeah, so this is how I look at it. You need, 3 of everything. So we have 3 power forwards. Jeremy, Chris, Jabari. Go to small forward. Knox can play small forward, right? We have Thibault. We have Nas, we have Repair. Okay, maybe Knox is better than Repair, but if either one of those guys is getting minutes, I'd rather give Repair in a tanking season or rebuilding season developmental minutes, right? So
that would be better for tanking because I'm tired. I see a bunch of people. I think some of them are junking saying we signed him to tank. Yeah. Playing Repair would be better for tanking and better for the long term. Go ahead.
So that's 6 forwards I mentioned. Without even mentioning, Sharp is going to have to play some shooting or small forward, if not a lot of small forward, especially if both Dame or Scoot and Ant are playing well. That means that Sharp has to play at least 12 minutes at small forward. So it's not a case like normally I would say, who cares? It's into the bench guy or whatever. But we already have 6, possibly 7 forwards that all probably deserve some sort of minutes, whether that's in a tanking season or winning season or whatever. At least 2 of those guys at each position probably needs minutes. And as Anthony Paris mentions, we cut Watford, or Wolford, as he said. We cut Watford, to sign Knox for the same amount of money. I don't know. Why not just keep Watford then if you need another forward guy. And then so I still think we need 3 centers. So now we have Moses Brown, Duop, Reath, and Nurk, I guess would be the 3 centers. Unless Nurk's traded, then like is George Conditt making this team as the 3rd center? Like I don't know. And then Scoot and Anthony and Sharp part of the time are going to take all the guard minutes. So I don't see how Mike says post trade depth changes. Well, none of those guys are being traded. Thibault and Grant can't be traded. We're not trading any of the rookies if we're trading Dame.
Thibault and Grant can be traded at the deadline, but
not right now.
Why wouldn't you sign somebody where it made more sense to have them after the deadline? Because Knox, it's like, it doesn't matter if they move on from him. Yeah. I don't expect him to be here next year. Why not sign a more long-term piece then? Is really just my whole point. If you're going into a rebuild and looking at reshuffling things, like, why not just sign a more long-term piece? More of a project guy. Somebody who, if you play him, might help you tank even better than Knox and has a future on a rebuilding team. Like, that has a point to it. Knox just... That's why I think it's pointless. Go ahead.
And then, against a small ball, Jabari is going to be more of a 5 than a 4. Knox probably playing that. I mean, Jabari's like 6'7". Like, so, okay, the plan is to play him at center. Yeah, I understand he plays more like a center. But you just said Knox and Nas are probably moving up to the 4. But there's still Chris and Jeremy there. Even if you play Jeremy at center or Jabari at center, you still have Chris and Jeremy. So Nas, Knox, so you still have 4 forwards, even if you play Jabari at center, if you're moving Knox or Nas up to the 4. I'm just saying, like, it just seems kind of pointless, but we did need to fill out the roster with someone. But yeah, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
There also, the other thing is there are teams that have too many guaranteed contracts are going to have to cut some players. Like Campaign got cut today. Not saying we want Campaign, but there's going to be players like that get cut as well.
Agent favor ? Knox doesn't have to move his stuff, so it's eco-friendly. Okay, well, at least an agent favor would have a little bit of a point of it being an agent favor. Like, that's more of a point than can be made otherwise. I just... Here's the thing. There's a lot of teams out there that get undrafted free agents and turn them into usable players down the line. Miami's one of those teams, right? Look at the Lakers. Where would they be without Austin Reeves? That was a guy who I was really high on, by the way. Really high on. Had a borderline first-round grade on him. And he went undrafted. Naz Reid. Right? He just got paid. It'd be nice to have him right now as a center. That's a guy I always wanted. Like, there's these guys that are identifiable if you have a good front office that go undrafted, that end up becoming NBA players down the line, 3-4 years into their career, which that's our timeline. So go identify some of those guys. If this front office is good, they should go identify some of those guys and bring them in. But Arrowmancer said Reeves wanted drafted because his agent told teams not to draft him. Well, guess what? We can do that too.
Well, that was the rumor with Repair that we're...
Exactly, which that's the best... That's maybe the most shrewd move this front office has made since Cronin took over. That's the move that I'll give the most props for. Even if it doesn't work out. I like that, because I like Repair's value there, and making sure he fell there was a good move. I just hope we don't end up playing Kevin Knox over him in a rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing against Kevin Knox. It's fine. Like I said, he probably won't even make the team, and it's not even worth talking about. It's just... I mean, just the fact that we're talking about Kevin Knox and Duop, Reath, and George Conditt as our Moses Brown as our frickin' free agent signings just shows you how sad the situation is.
Arguing whether or not they have a point.
Yeah.
They don't. Like, it's just... Like, what's... Duop Reath is the signing I'm most excited about.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to that sentence. Duop Reath is the signing that I'm most excited about this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, he has some skill as a big. I think he's a little flat-footed to be like a great defender, especially because he'll get hunted in pick and rolls. But yeah, I don't think that's a bad signing.
Yeah, like I'm like fine with that. See what he has at the NBA level. We're in a rebuild. See if he can prove something at an NBA level. Like, I'll say this. I like bringing in Duop Reath as our backup center, given our situation, better than I would have liked bringing back Drew Eubanks. Because you know what you got with Drew Eubanks? He's a borderline second, third string big. I think he's a little bit more of a third string big, but you know what he brings. Duop Reath, we don't know what he is at the NBA level, so why don't we find out? He'll probably end up being a third string big, but guess what? If he is, well, we're rebuilding. And playing him might help us tank. Like, and if he ends up being a backup quality center, then we just got a backup quality center for nothing. Cool. That's what we should have did instead of settling for the known product of Kevin Knox. Because at least that has a point. Either it helps you tank or he ends up being better than you expected and actually you get value out of nowhere. And maybe you end up with the next, Austin Reeves, Naz Reid, Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, Orlando Robinson. He's going to be good. Like, maybe you end up with the next one of those guys. Lou Dort. Anyway.
Not one person said to spend $8 million a year on Landale or
Randy
Pollard.
just doesn't listen. He just doesn't listen.
And DJ Vegas said we already have a bunch of young guys now with Brown, Baji, Duop Reath. Well, Baji's on a two-way, and the two-way things change a little bit. So there's like, you can play in 50 games, but if you don't have a full roster, you can't. It counts as like 2 games or something. It's something weird like that. But there's only a certain amount of games you can play two ways with this year. But there's a third two-way that's still open too. So it's kind of funny that we haven't filled that because that would have had nothing to do with roster spots or a Dame trade or whatever. But yeah.
Flight Lounge says, Knox is better than us getting another guard. We can never have enough wing depth. That has burned us the last couple of years. Well, we've been trying to win the last couple of years. If a team trying to win is relying on Kevin Knox, they're going to get burned anyway. But we're in rebuild mode, so who cares if we get burned? Why are we signing a guy like Kevin Knox to not get burned in a rebuild? It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, if we're struggling with depth, okay, more minutes for Chris Murray, more minutes for Jabari Walker to develop, minutes for Ryan Repair to develop. Like,
yeah, just play them all the minutes.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of talking in a little bit in circles here, but I truly want you guys to get in the mindset like, okay, this is a process. This is a process because I still think, kind of to that comment, and I'm not shaming anyone or anything. It's just we're so used to thinking of, okay, how do we shore up our weaknesses? How do we build a team to win around Dame? How can we win games next year? Right? Like, we shouldn't necessarily be in that mindset in a rebuild. It should be, how can we develop our players and put ourselves in position to win in the future? It's a different mindset.
Do we have 5 centers or no centers? That's what if we trade Nurk.
5 centers or no centers if we trade Nurk? That's a good question.
I mean, they're not all making the team. They're all two-ways or exhibit 10s or whatever.
We could have 5 centers while also having no centers. If you're talking about just centers in general, sure, we'd have 5 centers. You're talking about quality centers? We'd have none. Knox was a lottery pick that maybe the Blazers feel like they can unlock something. Well, then why didn't they pick up his $3 million team option? Why did they decline it? None of our wings are established besides Grant, so bring in a bunch of young, hungry guys fighting for minutes. We already have a bunch of young, hungry guys fighting for minutes. If we trade Dame, we're going to have like 8 of them at the forward spots. Why do we need a older, younger guy to have 9 of them? Like, yeah. Maybe Knox can be the vet for the younger players. Kevin Knox cannot be the vet for younger players.
Why can't Anthony and Jeremy be that vet?
Kevin Knox is a vet for young. I'm sorry, Mike, but I'm speechless. All right. No. If we want a vet, why don't we bring in an actual vet then? Like if we brought in who's a good vet on the free agent market that'd be a good vet mentor for our forwards. Is there even one left?
I don't know.
But if that was the case, that would the point would be you actually bring in a vet, not Kevin Knox. Okay. Yeah, hoping he's a vet. Anyway. Oubre is the vet? That would be a disaster. Oh, man. Anyway. 2/3 of people agree with us. Anything else for the stream, Eric?
No.
I think the Knox signing is even more pointless than you guys are saying that it's pointless to even worry about. I mean, yeah, we should not really be debating this.
Yeah.
But this is the last time we're going to debate it. It's just pointless. It's just pointless. Like, this is what we have to talk about, though, you know? I mean, until something truly happens, it's just got to get in that mindset of, you know, we're building for the future, and that's what we need to prioritize. Because if you're not in that mindset, I feel like next season is going to be rough for you. Enjoy the young guys, enjoy the development process. We haven't been in this process in a while. The only option right now, in my opinion, is just to embrace it. Still hope we win. You can have confidence that we're going to win. And if we do, guess what? Everything will be great. But I'm ready to struggle, which is par for the course in a rebuild. I'm ready to struggle and embrace the rebuild. That's fine. Hopefully it goes well.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're good in 3 years. Go ahead. Sorry.
And just this whole Knox thing has brought up like a bigger point, and that's that it's not the same mindset. So when you guys bring up like, well, we need depth or we need you guys argued that we needed this last year. It's a completely different scenario in our minds this year. And it's not a case of we want depth or whatever. I want the path of least resistance to get the 3 draft picks we just drafted and Shaden Sharp the most possible minutes and pathway to succeed. And I just think bringing in guys who are kind of okay or have a chance to be all right, or who can maybe show some things and take minutes from them, that is the wrong way to look at it. So it has nothing to do with Knox or whatever. I just think he's an okay enough player to where Chauncey might play him over Chris Murray or something one night, and that's going to make me mad because I want Chris Murray and Jabari Walker. Like, I want to see what those guys have, right? If we're going to insist on bringing back Jeremy and Thibault, those guys are going to get minutes too. So we're already talking about those guys having to play some, and then you have to make time for these young guys. So I'd much rather just give them to, like, Batum got thrown right in his rookie year, right? And that I think that was really good for him because he just needed to play and get those minutes. So I just want that kind of stuff. And DJ Vega brings up Nas. Like, there's a chance that Nas, I'd rather give those minutes to him than Knox as well, just because I think he still has more of a chance of breaking out, and he's actually under contract right now. So that's just the way I approach it. Is I'm just looking at whatever path gets the guys that they identify as part of their core moving forward, and identifying that as quickly as possible and putting the best pieces around those guys to get them. And I just think like guys like Kevin Knox are just kind of pointless to have on the roster.
What are you guys going to do without us melting down in post-game shows next year? How do you guys feel about our mindset going into next season? That's the final question of the stream. Our mindset is very clear. Let me know in chat how you guys feel about our mindset going into next season.
Do you think it's going to be easier to enjoy Blazers Uprise content or enjoy the season with this sort of mindset? Do you guys not like our mindset? Do you guys think we're spot on? Let us know. I'm curious. Anyway, go ahead.
One thing we didn't mention too is there's now going to be more strict rules about resting players, which could also come into play if we have Damian Lillard on our roster, because there's certain times we won't be able to just sit him for no reason. So that could also factor into things. Is you can't just sit out players anymore like we've done the last 2 years. We might have to.
Well, it's only star players, right?
Well, star players, yeah, but so Dame's the only one that qualifies this year, but in the future it might change things.
Yeah, we might not have to worry about that at all.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I'll do a chat poll for this.
Yep, that's a huge risk too, DJ Vega. Knock on wood that doesn't happen if we decide to go that route.
All right. There's your chat poll, chat. The 3 options. Like it, it's spot on. Meh, you understand it, maybe not thrilled about it. And then the other option is no, we're winning next year, bozos.
All right. Anyway. Final words as I let this poll run. Are you surprised by the results so far?
No, nothing surprised me with chat. Yep.
Connor says I chose the winning option personally. Well, Connor, you're a bozo, as X would say. Listen, if we win next year, we'll be happy. It'll be fine. It'll be because Scoot and Ant are playing amazing. Like, so we'll be fine. It's a lot nice. It's actually quite nice going into next season, like expecting to lose and then willing to be pleasantly surprised and knowing it's not going to be stressful for us because of where our mindset is at this point. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's actually very nice. It's refreshing, and it's going to be interesting to see how it goes with that. I just, listen, if we're sitting here losing, like, I'm not going to sit here and, maybe I will say I told you so once or twice, but we'll see.
You think we're going to tank again?
I did a chat poll, and there was like 100 votes, and the majority of people said we were finishing 13th to 15th. So I think chat just like the bozos option.
Yeah, true.
Anyway.
Any chance to call us bozos?
Adding bozo is funnier, hence the best choice, says Mike.
Well, no doubt that you would choose that, Mike. I had no doubt about that.
I bet if I removed that word, the poll would be different, yeah. Anyway.
But no, I think they're actually going to try and win. I don't think they're going to sit anyone next year, unless they truly do have injuries. I think they are going to try to win as many games as possible, even if it's not beneficial to them. But
yeah, I mean, I love going. I actually kind of love going into next season with this mindset.
Yeah.
People will say it's negative, but I think it's realistic. I always just try and be realistic. I'm not going to be biased, and there's really no downside to going into next season just hoping for development, and that's about it. There's no downside to that.
And for the record, that's why I want to trade Dame now that this situation has happened. I mean, obviously I didn't want them to go the young route, but now that they chose that, I want them to trade Dame so we can focus on making it as good as possible. And I don't think as long as this lingers, it's possible to get the most out of this situation.
Yep. Anyway, thank you, chat. Thank you to Oscar and Polly Ross for donating. Appreciate y'all. We'll see if a Dame trade happens. We'll go live as soon as possible. I actually woke up at 8:30 this morning, Eric.
This
Well.
was the day it should have happened. I have not had my ringer on, but honestly, at this point, I think I'm going to turn my ringer back on because at that point.
Yeah.
Anyway, looking forward to next stream, seeing what else we have to talk about. Yeah, there's 3 weeks until training camp. 3 weeks until training camp, Eric.
That's crazy.
So I mean, it either happens before training camp and happens soon, or it doesn't.
Media day is going to be fun.
Are you guys ready for the chaos?
Even if you hate our mindset and hate our opinions, the content's going to be entertaining. The debates with chat are going to be entertaining. We're going to keep you entertained.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do. So, looking forward to another season of Blazers Uprise following this freaking team. Anyway, that's a wrap for the stream. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Thank you to Eric for being a great co-host. Good luck tomorrow. I know you got short turnaround before work tomorrow now, so
Early morning work now.
we're gonna
Sucks.
work on getting these a little earlier. And yeah, thank you to all of
Well,
you.
once the season started, I mean, it's post-game shows, but the live shows will be earlier in the day. It won't be-
Yeah, 3:30. Yeah. So it'll be fine, and already kind of setting up things for picks against the spread. New sportsbook sponsor next year. That's all I'm gonna say. Pretty happy about that. So
I may have to cut out early some nights on the post-game show.
yeah, that's fine. We'll have more guests next year in general. Just on separate. We're building out more content, So I'll make do. I'll try my best without my. I almost called you a sidekick, but I feel like that's insulting because we're equal. So
It's fine.
yeah.
DJ Vega says he's happy because he still gets to play with Dame in 2K. Well, yeah, while they talk about him getting traded to the Heat.
That was hilarious. Also, why'd you buy 2K? Screw 2K. I hate 2K. Anyway, perfect note to end the stream with some 2K hate. Have a good rest of your night. We'll be live again on Thursday. Might be a video before then. We'll see. Might be time I make a video. Anyway, we're out here. Until next time, as always, peace out. Go Blazers!